Samuel Carter drove his hands beneath the cold churning water and dragged the half-drowned woman onto the riverbank, her blood staining his sleeves before he ever saw her face. "Don't you die on me, ma'am. Don't you dare." His voice cracked, a sound he hadn't heard from himself since the day he buried his wife. He pressed his palm to her throat. A pulse. Faint, but stubborn. And in that moment, a man who'd sworn never to feel anything again felt his whole shattered world tilt sideways. If this story moves you, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single chapter. Stay with me until the very end and tell me in the comments which city or town you're watching from tonight, so I can see how far this story has traveled. Samuel Carter rode his sorrel mare hard along the south bend of the Powder River, the first heat of a Wyoming summer, already pressing down on the back of his neck. He'd been chasing a stray heifer since before dawn, and his temper was thinner than the coffee his daughter had poured him an hour earlier. Then the mare planted her hooves and refused to take another step. "Easy, girl. What's got you?" He followed the line of her ears down to the water, and his heart stopped clean in his chest. A woman lay caught in the shallows, her dress fanning out around her like a shroud, one pale arm trailing in the current. Lord have mercy. He was off the saddle before he knew he'd swung his leg. The water hit his knees cold enough to steal the air from his lungs, snowmelt still feeding the river even in July. He waded out, planted his boots in the silt, and got his arms under her. "Easy, ma'am. I got you. I got you now." She didn't answer. She didn't move. He hauled her up onto the bank and went down on his knees beside her, his hands shaking the way they hadn't shaken since he'd held his wife's wrist in their bedroom and felt the pulse fade out of it. "Don't you do this. Don't you dare." He pressed his ear to her chest. He couldn't tell if it was her heart he was hearing or his own hammering against his ribs. "Come on, come on, come on, come on." He turned her on her side, and the river came out of her in two great heaving rushes, gray water and bile, and then she coughed a thin, ragged sound, but a living one. That's right, ma'am. You breathe for me." He looked at her, then really looked, and what he saw made the breath catch in his own throat. Bruises the color of plums down the side of her face. A split lip crusted brown with old blood. A welt across her collarbone, in the unmistakable shape of a man's belt buckle. Samuel Carter had been a soldier once, before the ranch, before Sarah, before the children. He knew what a body looked like when somebody had tried to kill it. He gathered her up against his chest like she weighed nothing at all, and he carried her to the mare. "You hold on now. You hold on, you hear me. I ain't burying nobody else. Not today. Not ever again." He rode for home with her cradled against him, one hand on the reins, and the other splayed across her back, to feel the small rise and fall that meant she was still breathing. The cabin door banged open, before he'd even pulled the mare to a stop. "Pa!" Megan stood on the porch, 12 years old, and already half a woman, her mother's red hair coming loose from its braid. "Pa, what in the world? Get me hot water, Meg, and the box from under your mama's bed." "Pa, who is she? Hot water. Now." His daughter didn't move. She stared at the woman in his arms with her mouth pressed flat the way Sarah used to press her mouth flat when she was making up her mind whether to be angry. "Megan Carter, I don't ask you twice." "Yes, sir." She vanished inside. Luke was already at his elbow, 8 years old, and full of questions, his shirt buttoned up wrong the way it always was. "Pa, is she dead?" "No, son." "She looks dead." "She ain't." "There's blood on your shirt, Pa." "I know there is." "Whose blood?" Samuel stopped in the dooryard and looked down at his boy and made himself speak gentle, because the boy hadn't asked for any of this either. "Hers, Luke. It's hers. Now you go on and fetch me a clean blanket from the cedar chest. The thick one. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, sir." "Good boy." He carried her through the front room and stopped in the hallway because his feet had taken him to the wrong door. Sarah's door. The room he hadn't slept in for 3 years and 4 months and 11 days. The door he kept closed because closing it was the only way he knew how to keep on living. He shouldered it open. He laid the woman down on his dead wife's quilt, and he tried to remember how to breathe. Megan came in with the kettle and stopped in the doorway like she'd hit a wall. "Pa, not in here. Bring me the water, Meg. This is Mama's room. I know whose room it is. You said nobody was ever supposed to—" "Megan." He didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. But something in it must have landed because she came forward and she set the kettle down, and she did not say another word about her mother's room. She looked at the woman on the bed. She looked at her father's hands red to the wrist with somebody else's blood. "Pa?" Quieter now. "Who did this to her?" "I don't know." "Is he coming for her?" Samuel didn't answer that one. He hadn't let himself think it yet. "Get me the box, Meg, and then take your brother out to the barn and check the colt's hoof, the one I've been worried about." "Pa, please, daughter." She went. He worked on her for the better part of an hour. He cut her dress away where the cloth had stuck to her wounds, and he washed her with water, as warm as he dared. And he did the things a rancher learns to do when he's lost a wife, and there ain't a doctor inside 30 miles. He set the small bone in her wrist that had been broken and badly set already weeks ago by the look of it, and never given a chance to heal proper. He pulled a shard of glass from the meat of her shoulder. He counted the marks on her back, and then he stopped counting because the counting wasn't doing him any good. Halfway through, her fingers closed on his wrist. Weak. But there. He froze. Her eyes opened, gray as river water, and every bit as cold. "Don't," she whispered. "Ma'am, don't touch me. I'm just tending your hurts. I ain't gonna. Please, please don't. Easy, easy now. You're safe." She made a sound then that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob. "No, I ain't." And her eyes rolled back and her hand fell away from his wrist, and she was gone again. Samuel sat back on his heels and pressed his bloody palms against his face, and discovered to his own astonishment that he was the one shaking. A horse came up the trail an hour after sundown. Samuel knew the sound of every horse for 10 miles. This one was Mrs. Eliza Barrett's bay gelding, and Mrs. Barrett never rode out at sundown unless there was gossip to gather or trouble to spread. He met her on the porch with the door pulled shut behind him. "Evening, Mrs. Barrett." "Mr. Carter." She did not dismount. She liked talking to a man from on top of a horse. She felt it gave her the upper hand. "Word in town is you was seen riding in this afternoon with a body laid across your saddle. Word in town travels fast. Is it true?" "It is." "A woman, they're saying." "That's right." "Dead?" "Alive. Just barely." Mrs. Barrett's mouth went small the way it always did when life refused to give her the scandal she'd come for. "Mr. Carter, I do hope you understand how this is going to look." "Look how, ma'am." "A widower. 2 young children in the house, a strange woman in his bed." "She ain't in my bed." "You know what I mean." "I reckon I do." "People talk." "People always talk, Mrs. Barrett. That ain't never stopped you before." She drew herself up. "I came out here as a Christian neighbor." "You came out here to see if there was a body." "Mr. Carter, there was a woman in that cabin who was beat near to death and dumped in the Powder River like a sack of stones. I pulled her out. I aimed to keep her alive. If that don't sit right with the good people of Cold Creek, the good people of Cold Creek can come tell me to my face." "You'd do well to send for Reverend Thorne." "I'd do well to mind my own business, ma'am, and I'd thank you to do the same." Mrs. Barrett gathered her reins. "I'll be praying for you, Mr. Carter." "You do that. And for your children." That one landed. He felt it land. He kept his face still. "Ride safe, Mrs. Barrett." She rode off, and he stood on the porch with his arms crossed and watched her go, and only when she was out of sight did he allow himself to put his back against the door and close his eyes. Megan was waiting for him in the kitchen. "She's gonna tell everybody, Pa. I know it. She's gonna tell Mr. Kent. I expect she will." "Pa." His daughter's voice was so small. "What if Mr. Kent comes?" "Then he comes." "What if they make us send her away?" He looked at his girl. He looked at her red hair and her serious eyes, and the way she was standing with her hands clenched into fists at her sides, like she was already getting ready for a fight she hadn't been told about. "Megan, you listen to me now." "Yes, sir." "Your mama before she went made me a promise, and I made one back." "What promise?" "She said, 'Sam Carter, don't you turn into a hard man on account of me.' And I said, 'No, Sarah, I won't.'" Megan's eyes filled up. "There is a hurt woman in there, Meg, and I don't know her name and I don't know her story, but I know what I saw on her body, and there ain't a power in this town nor in this whole territory that's gonna make me put her back out on that road. You understand me?" "Yes, sir." "You with me, daughter?" A long pause, and then very quiet. "I'm with you, Pa. Good girl." He kissed the top of her head, and he tasted river water in her hair, where she'd leaned against him, and he wondered when this day was going to end. The woman cried out around midnight. He was already half awake in the chair by the bed. He'd told himself he'd sit there until she stirred. He'd told himself it was just to watch for fever. He hadn't told himself the real reason, which was that he hadn't been able to bring himself to leave her alone in his wife's room. She was thrashing, eyes shut, mouth open in a scream that wouldn't quite come. "No, no, please, not again." Ma'am, you're safe. Don't let him." "You're safe. You hear me? You're safe." She came awake all at once the way a deer comes awake, and she was halfway off the bed and crawling toward the wall before he could get to his feet. "Easy. Easy now." "Where am I?" "My cabin. Outside Cold Creek. I pulled you from the river this morning." "The river?" "Yes, ma'am." She pressed her back against the wall. Her hair was loose and dark around her face, and the bruises on her cheekbone had darkened in the night to the color of a storm cloud. "Who are you?" "Samuel Carter. I run the ranch east of town. My boy's name is Luke, and my girl's name is Megan, and there ain't no one else here but us. You're safe in this house." "Safe." "Yes, ma'am." She laughed. It was the worst sound he had ever heard a person make. "There ain't no such thing." "Ma'am, you shouldn't have pulled me out." "Now don't you say that. You don't know what you done." "I know exactly what I done." "He'll come." That word landed in the room like an axe in a stump. "Who'll come?" "He will." "What's your name, ma'am?" "It don't matter what my name is. It matters to me." She looked at him then. Really looked. The way she'd looked at him the first time her eyes had opened gray and cold as river water. Except now there was something else in them. Something that hadn't been there before. A flicker weak as a candle in a draft of something that might have been hope and might have been just disbelief. "Nora," she whispered. "My name is Nora." "Nora." "Nora Hale." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Hale." "You shouldn't be." "I'll judge that for myself." She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. He didn't move toward her. He'd learned with horses and with Sarah and with grieving children that some creatures you don't approach. You let them come to you. "He thought I was dead," she said. "Who did, ma'am? My husband." A long silence. Samuel found that he was holding his breath. "He left me in the river," she said. He stood on the bank and he watched me float away, and he turned his back. He thought the water would do what his hands hadn't finished. "Lord, he has people, he has money, he has a name in this territory. When he finds out I lived, and he will find out, Mr. He always does, he will come here. He will come for me, and he will not come alone. Then he will come. You ain't listenin'." "I'm listenin' just fine. He will burn this house, Mr. Carter, with your children inside it." Samuel was quiet a long moment. Outside an owl called once, and then again, and then went still. "Miss Hale?" "Yes." "What's your husband's name?" She closed her eyes. "Don't make me say it." "All right. Not yet." "All right, ma'am. Just let me sleep. Just one night. Just one night of sleep where I ain't afraid. And then in the mornin' I'll walk, You won't go anywhere. Mr. Carter, you won't go anywhere, Nora Hale, not tonight, not in the mornin', not until you can stand on your own 2 feet, and not until I'm sure the man who put those marks on you ain't waitin' on the other side of my fence line. You hear me? You don't owe me. This ain't about owin'. This is about what kind of man I aim to be in this world. And I aim to be the kind that don't put a beat woman back out on the road. She was crying now, not loud. He almost couldn't tell, but her shoulders were moving. You'll regret it, she whispered. I might. You will. Then I will. He stood up slow, and he set a folded blanket on the foot of the bed where she could reach it, and he walked to the door. Mr. Carter. He stopped. Yes, ma'am. Why? He thought about it. He thought about Sarah and the promise he'd made, and the river, and the children, and his own mother who'd died alone in a snowstorm, because there hadn't been anybody on her road that day willing to stop. Because somebody should have, he said, and he closed the door behind him. He sat at the kitchen table the rest of the night. He did not sleep. Once near dawn he heard her crying through the wall, and once he heard her laughing, and he could not tell which sound was worse. Megan came down at first light in her nightdress, with her hair undone. Pa. Mornin', daughter. You been up all night? I have. She sat down across from him. She put her small hand over his big one. What's her name, Pa? Nora. Nora. Megan repeated like she was trying the shape of it. That's a pretty name. It is. Is she stayin'? He looked at his daughter. 12 years old. Already half a woman. Already somebody who had buried her mother and helped raise her brother and learned how to make bread before she'd learned how to read. Yeah, Meg, she's stayin'. Megan nodded slow. All right, Pa. All right. All right. She got up and started the stove, and Samuel Carter sat at his own kitchen table in his own house, in the territory where he had buried one wife and made his living and raised his children. And he understood the way a man understands a coming storm, before he has any proof of it, that the life he had been so carefully holding together was about to come apart in his hands. And he was not sorry. Not for one single second. The morning came on slow and gold, and Samuel Carter was still sitting at his kitchen table when Nora Hale tried to walk out his front door. He heard her before he saw her. The careful step of a woman who didn't want to wake anybody. The hitch in her breath when her ribs caught. He set down his coffee and waited. She came around the corner in his dead wife's wrapper, holding it closed at the throat with both hands. Mornin', Miss Hale? She froze. You'd best sit down before you fall down. I aim to leave. I figured you did. Then don't try and stop me. I won't try and stop you, ma'am. I'll just point out you ain't wearing shoes, you ain't got a horse, and you can't lift your right arm above your shoulder. You'll make it half a mile. Then I'll make it half a mile. Nora. It was the first time he'd said her name out loud. It surprised them both. She put her good hand against the doorframe like she needed it to hold her up. Sit down, please. Why? Because I cooked enough oats for 3, and my boy don't eat 'em, and I hate wasting food. A small thing happened in her face. Not a smile. Something more careful than a smile. The shape a smile makes before a person remembers they ain't supposed to. She sat down. He set a bowl in front of her, and a spoon beside it. He poured honey on top because it was what Sarah used to do for the children, and he didn't know what else to do. Eat slow, he said. Your stomach ain't seen food in a while. How do you know? Way you flinched when I touched your belly last night. Empty stomachs ache different than full ones. She looked down at the bowl. She did not pick up the spoon. Mr. Carter? Samuel. Mr. Carter. If I eat your food and sleep in your bed and wear your wife's clothes, I owe you, and I ain't got nothing to pay with. You don't owe me a thing. That ain't how the world works. It's how my house works. Mr. Carter. Eat Nora. She ate. 3 bites. Then she set the spoon down because her hand had started to shake, and she put her face down into both palms, and she did not cry. She just stayed that way, very still, breathing through her fingers. Samuel did not touch her. He sat across the table and drank his coffee, and he understood with a clarity that surprised him that this was the closest he'd come to praying since the day his wife died. The children came in then. Luke first. He tumbled into the kitchen the way an 8-year-old tumbles, all elbows and questions, and stopped dead when he saw Nora at the table. "Pa." "Mornin', son." "Pa, that's the lady." "It is. She's awake." "I noticed." Luke crept closer. Nora lifted her face from her hands and looked at him, and the boy did what an 8-year-old does, which was stare straight at the bruises and ask the question without filtering it through any politeness whatsoever. "Did you fall off a horse?" "Luke," Samuel said. "It's a fair question, Pa." Nora's mouth twitched. "It is a fair question." "Did you—" "No, sugar, I didn't fall off a horse." "Then what happened?" "Luke, sit down. Eat." "But Pa—" "Luke." The boy sat. Megan was last in. She came down the stairs, already braided, already buttoned, already wearing the quiet face that her mother used to wear when she was getting ready to handle something. "Mornin', Miss Hale." "Mornin', Megan." "Pa says you're stayin'." "He told me the same thing." "Are you—" Nora looked at Samuel. Samuel kept his eyes on his coffee. "For a little while," Nora said. "How little, Megan?" "I'm just askin', Pa." "Ask it nicer." "I'm askin' as nice as I know how." Nora set her spoon down. "Until I can stand on my own, Megan, and then I'll be on my way. I won't be a burden on your family. I give you my word." Megan considered this. 12 years old and already weighing things the way a grown woman weighs them. "My mama's wrapper looks all right on you," she said, and she sat down and ate her oats, and that was the closest thing to a welcome the house could give. The first horse came up the trail at 10 in the morning. Samuel was in the dooryard splitting kindling when he heard it. He set the axe down slow and walked to the gate, and he met Reverend Thorne with his hat in his hand and his mouth full of words he hadn't worked out yet. "Samuel." "Reverend." "I'll come right to it." "I'd appreciate that." "There's talk." "There's always talk." "Mrs. Barrett." "I figured." "She says you've taken in a fallen woman." Samuel's jaw set. He did not answer that. "Samuel, I'm not here to condemn. I'm here as your pastor." "Then come in and meet her." "That ain't what I—" "Come in and meet her, Reverend. Sit at my table. Look her in the eye, and then you tell me what kind of woman she is." The Reverend did not move. "I can't, Samuel." "You can't or you won't." "My wife." "Your wife sent you." "My wife is concerned." "I bet she is." "Samuel, listen to me. There's already men asking questions in town. A stranger came through the livery yesterday afternoon asking about a dark-haired woman might have come down river." The world went very quiet. "What did you say his name was?" "I didn't. He didn't give one." "What'd he look like?" "Tall man, black coat, spurs that'd cost a year of your wages, Samuel." Samuel set his hands on the gate. He held on. "Reverend." "Yes." "You go on back to town. You tell whoever asks that there ain't no woman at this ranch but my daughter Megan. You tell 'em you came out here yourself and you saw." "I can't lie for you, Samuel." "I ain't asking you to lie. I'm asking you to remember whose church my Sarah is buried behind, and whose hand built half the pews you preach from. And then you decide what you can and cannot say." The Reverend looked at him a long time. "I'll pray on it." "You do that." "Samuel." "Ride safe, Reverend." The man rode off, and Samuel stood at the gate with his hands locked on the top rail, and he did not move until his daughter came up behind him and slipped her small hand into his. "Pa." "Yeah." "Was that man asking about her?" "Looks like." "Is it her husband?" He looked down at his girl. "Megan." "What do you know about that?" "I heard her crying last night." "You weren't supposed to." "Nobody's ever supposed to. I always do." He let out a long breath. "Yeah, Meg. Could be him." "What are we gonna do, Pa?" We are gonna keep chopping kindling, and we are gonna feed the stock, and we are gonna act like nothing happened. And tonight, when your brother's asleep, you and me are gonna talk about something I never thought I'd have to talk to my daughter about." "What's that?" "The rifle." She didn't flinch. He had to give her that. She didn't flinch. "Yes, sir." The second rider came at noon. This one didn't wait at the gate. This one rode straight into the dooryard like he owned the dirt under the hooves, and he drew his horse up an arm's length from where Samuel was standing, and he did not get down. "Carter." "Mr. Kent. Aldrich Kent, town councilman. 48 years old with a coat worth more than Samuel's whole barn, and the smile of a man who had never once in his life been told no by somebody he couldn't punish. Heard you've got company." "Word travels fast. Word travels how I tell it to travel, Carter. That's the nature of the position." "Pleased for you." Kent's smile stayed pinned in place. "I won't dance, Carter. There is a woman in your house. The town don't know her. Your wife is dead, and your children are young, and there is a question to be answered." "Ain't a question I owe you." "I disagree." "You can disagree from off my land?" Kent's smile thinned. "You and me have been neighbors a long time, Sam." "We have not been neighbors. You have owned the bank that holds my note, and I have paid you on time every quarter, and that has been the sum of our acquaintance." "That note comes due in October." There it was. Samuel did not move a muscle. "It does." "It would be a shame," Kent said, "if a man's reputation made his note difficult to extend." "It would." "Send the woman to town, Carter. Let the church take her. Let the doctor see her. Let the proper channels—" "There ain't no proper channel for what was done to that woman, Mr. Kent." "Excuse me. You heard." The two men looked at each other across the yard. A bird called somewhere out past the barn. Nothing else moved. "Carter, I am trying to help you. You are trying to make me jump. I am trying to protect this town from the kind of woman who turns up half-drowned with no name and no people. Her name is Nora Hale." "That's so." "That's so." "And where are her people?" "Dead, far as she's told me." "Convenient." "You watch your mouth, Mr. Kent." "Excuse me. You are sitting on my horse property, eating my air, threatening my livelihood, and now you are insulting a woman in my house who has not done one thing wrong but get herself near killed. You are going to watch your mouth, sir, or you are going to ride off, and I do not care which." Kent's face went a shade Samuel had not seen on it before. It was the color a banker's face goes when it has just understood for the very first time that the man across from him is not afraid. "You'll regret this." "I expect I will." "There's a stranger in town, Carter. Tall fella, asking questions." Samuel kept his face still. "That's so. Black coat. Looks like he's got money. Says he's looking for a wife who run off on him." "Hadn't heard." "He's offering a reward." "Is he?" $200. Samuel did not blink. "You're about $10 short of my note, Mr. Kent." "Excuse me. You heard." Kent stared down at him from the saddle, and Samuel Carter stared back up. And somewhere in the cabin behind a curtained window, a woman with bruises the color of storm clouds was watching, and her good hand was pressed flat against the glass. "You think on it, Carter." "I have thought on it." Kent wheeled his horse. He rode out of the dooryard at a trot, and he did not look back. Samuel waited until the dust settled before he let his shoulders drop. He turned around. Nora was already at the door. She had heard every word. "Mr. Carter? Get back inside. He'll—" "Get inside, Nora." She stepped back. He came up onto the porch and shut the door behind them, and he leaned his forehead against the wood, and he stayed that way a long moment. "It was him," she whispered. "The man asking. Tall, black coat, $200. "I figured." "His name is Cyrus Hale." Samuel turned his head. "Hale. It was my name before it was his. He took it when he took me." "How long ago?" 6 years. 6 years. I was 16. The number landed in the room. Samuel did not respond to it. He could not just yet. Mr. Carter. Samuel. Samuel, he has men. 3, sometimes 4. He has a brother who's a federal marshal in the next territory. He has money I do not understand the size of, and he does not lose. He lost you. He thinks he killed me. That ain't losing you, that's misplacing you. And when he finds out you ain't where he put you, he is gonna come. Yes. How long? A day, maybe 2. All right? All right. That's all you got to say. All right. Nora, I ain't a man who runs his mouth before he thinks. I am thinkin'. She sat down hard in the chair by the door. Her good hand came up and covered her mouth. Her shoulders started to shake. You should put me out. I should not. You have children. I know it. You have a note comin' due. I know that too. Then why? Because somebody should have Nora. I told you that last night, and I will tell you that every night you ask me until you start to believe it. She looked at him. The light through the window caught her face, and Samuel saw for the first time what she might have looked like before her husband ever laid a hand on her. There was a face under the bruises, a young face, a face that had not yet learned to flinch. He looked away because he had no business looking that long. I need to ask you something, he said. Anything. That mark on your collarbone, the one shaped like a buckle, is that the only one? She did not answer. Nora. No. How many times? I do not know. After a while you stop. I know, ma'am, I'm sorry. Why are you asking? Because if it comes to a courtroom, those marks are evidence. If it comes to a fight, those marks are reason. And if it comes to the worst thing, it could come to those marks are why I will sleep at night for the rest of my life. She closed her eyes. There's one on my back, from a stove poker. He missed the first time. He didn't miss the second. All right. There's another. You don't have to tell me. There's one I will not show anyone, ever, not even a doctor. All right, Nora. Do you understand what kind of man is coming here? I understand. Then you understand why you should put me out. He went down on one knee in front of her chair. He did it slow because his bad knee did not bend the way it used to, and because some kinds of words you cannot deliver standing up. Listen to me. She would not look at him. Nora, look at me. She looked. 3 years ago, I buried my wife in the dirt behind that church, and I made her a promise that I have spent every single day since trying to keep. Now this morning, a man rode up onto my property, and he threatened my note, and he called you a name, and he insulted my house, and I did not lift a hand to him because I am not a man who lifts hands. Samuel, but if Cyrus Hale comes onto this property, ma'am, if that man sets one boot on my dirt, I am going to lift a hand, and I am going to lift it for you, and I am going to lift it for every woman whose name I never knew because nobody pulled her out of a river. Do you understand me? She was crying, without sound, without shame, the way a person cries when they have spent 6 years not being allowed to. Yes, sir. Good. Samuel. Yes. I do not know how to thank somebody. Then don't. I never learned. Then don't, Nora. He stood up. His knee popped. He rested his hand very briefly on the crown of her head, the way a man pats a horse he has come to trust. And then he stepped back because the line was right there, and he did not aim to cross it. I'm going to go get the rifle down, he said. You stay inside. Keep the curtains drawn. If anybody comes up that road who ain't me or my children, you go to the cellar and you do not come out until I call your name 3 times. 2 times don't count. 3 times. Can you remember that? 3 times. Good. He was at the door when she spoke again. Samuel. Ma'am? What was your wife's name? He stopped with his hand on the latch. Sarah. Sarah Carter. Yes, ma'am. She raised a good man. He stood very still. Then he opened the door, and he went out, and he closed it carefully behind him. And in the dooryard, with the sun coming high, and the horses stamping in the corral, and his daughter watching him from the barn, with eyes that were too old for her face. Samuel Carter walked across the dirt to the woodshed and pulled down the rifle his father had given him on his 12th birthday, and he loaded it slow and steady, with hands that did not shake. He had been a soldier once. He had not forgotten how. By the time he came back out into the dooryard, a third rider was on the road. But this one was coming hard, and this one was not alone. The riders came in fast and loud, 2 horses kicking up dust, and Samuel Carter put his back to the cabin wall and brought the rifle up halfway before he recognized the lead horse. "Pa?" Megan was at his elbow. "That's Doc Whitman." "I see it." "And the sheriff." "I see that too." "Pa, what do you—" "Get inside. Get your brother. Tell Miss Hale not to come out unless I call for her." "Yes, sir." She vanished. Samuel set the rifle down against the porch rail barrel up hammered down where any man with eyes could see he was not aiming to hide it, and he stepped out into the dooryard. Doc Whitman swung off his horse first. 68 years old, gray as a winter sky with a black bag in his hand, he had carried since before Samuel was born. The sheriff stayed mounted. Sheriff Otis Barlow, a stout man with a tired face and a star pinned crooked on a coat that had seen too many seasons. "Sam." "Doc." "Sam, we got a problem." "I figured. Mrs. Barrett come into town this morning saying you've got a beat woman in your house." "Mrs. Barrett comes into town most mornings." This time the sheriff had to listen, son. There was a stranger heard her say it. Samuel's eyes went to Barlow. Barlow held up a gloved hand. "Sam, I'm here to do my job. That's all." "Your job." "The state law says if a woman is hurt, a peace officer has to lay eyes on her. I don't make the law. I just walk in front of it." "And the doc?" "I asked him to ride with me." "Why?" "Because if there's a beat woman in your house, son, she don't need a sheriff first. She needs a doctor." Samuel was quiet a long moment. Then he turned his head toward the cabin. "Nora." The door opened. She came out slow, one hand on the frame to steady herself, wearing Sarah's wrapper and Sarah's shawl, and the bruises on her face caught the noon light without mercy. Doc Whitman set his bag down in the dirt. "Lord?" "That's enough, Doc," Samuel said quiet. "Sam, that woman has been— I know what she's been. Just see to her." Doc came up the porch steps slow, the way a man approaches a wounded animal he means to help. He did not touch her. He stood 3 feet off and he said, "Ma'am, my name is Eli Whitman. I have been the doctor in this county for 31 years. May I have a look at your wrist?" Nora held it out. He took her hand in both of his. He turned it over. He pressed once with his thumb, and Nora flinched, and the doc made a sound in his throat that was not a word. "Who set this?" "My husband." "Your husband set this bone?" "After he broke it." The doc closed his eyes. "Ma'am, may I see the rest?" "Doctor." "I will not look at anything you do not show me. I am asking your permission." She looked at Samuel. Samuel did not nod. He did not need to. She turned her face back to the doc, and she pulled the shawl off her shoulder, and she let it fall enough to show the welt across her collarbone. "Lord in heaven." "There's more, doctor." "I expect there is. Do you need to see all of it?" "No, ma'am, I do not." He stepped back. He took his hat off. He held it against his chest like he had walked into a church. "Sheriff?" "Doc." "I'm done looking." "Your statement." "My statement is this woman has been beat near to death by somebody who knew where to hit her so the marks wouldn't show in a high collar, and I will swear to that on a Bible in any courtroom in this territory." The sheriff swung off his horse slow. He came up to the porch. He did not climb it. He stood on the bottom step and took his hat off and held it the same way the doc was holding his. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Nora Hale." "Ma'am, who did this to you?" "My husband, Cyrus Hale." "Of where?" "Cheyenne, originally. We've been 3 places since." "Ma'am, do you wish to file a complaint against your husband for assault and attempted murder?" The whole world stopped breathing. Nora Hale looked down at the sheriff's hat in his hands. She looked at the doc. She looked at Samuel, who had not moved a muscle, whose face was the face of a man who had told her last night that her marks were evidence, and was holding to it now without a flicker. "Yes," she said. "I do." "Then I will write it down, ma'am, and I will get your mark on it, and I will file it in the territorial court, and I will telegraph the federal marshal in Cheyenne and ask if Mr. Cyrus Hale is known to him. His brother is the federal marshal in Cheyenne." The sheriff stopped with his hand halfway to his pocket. "Beg pardon, ma'am." "Caleb Hale, he's the marshal. He covered for Cyrus the last 2 times. The sheriff put his hat back on. "Then I will telegraph the federal marshal in Denver instead." "You'd do that?" "Ma'am, I've been a peace officer for 19 years. There is a kind of man I have spent my whole career hoping to put a rope on, and from the sound of it, your husband is that kind. So yes, ma'am, I will do that." Nora's good hand came up and covered her mouth. The doc cleared his throat. "Sam, there is a town meeting tonight, 7 o'clock. Kent called it." "Figured he would. He's asking the council to vote on whether to put pressure on you to send the woman away." "Pressure how?" "He didn't say. He don't have to say." "My note." "Your note. And the lease on your south pasture, and the mill rights." Samuel rubbed his jaw. "Sam," the sheriff said, "there ain't no law that lets him do what he's threatening, but there ain't no law that stops him neither, and the council is full of men who owe him money. I know it. Are you coming?" "I'm coming. Sam, you bring her, the whole town is going to see her face." "That's the idea, Sheriff." The sheriff looked at him a long moment. "All right, Carter. All right. I'll see you at 7. The 2 men mounted up. The doc paused with his foot in the stirrup. "Nora?" "Yes, doctor." "There is a bone in your wrist that did not heal right. When this is over, I want you to come to my office and I am going to break it again and set it proper." "That sounds painful." "It is, ma'am." "All right, doctor." "Good girl." They rode off, and Samuel Carter stood in his dooryard and watched them go, and Nora Hale stood on his porch in his dead wife's shawl, and neither one of them said anything for a long time. Megan came out behind her brother. "Pa?" "Yeah." "What's a town meeting?" "It's where folks who don't have any business in your house get together and decide what to do about your house." "Are we going?" "We are. All of us. All of us." Luke piped up. "Even her. Especially her." "Pa?" Megan again. "What if they vote against us? Then we live with what they decide, daughter." "And if they vote for us, then we live with that too." "Pa." Nora this time. "I cannot." "You can." "I will not stand in a room full of people and—" "You will." Samuel. "Nora, listen to me. There is a man in town with $200 and a hard look, and he is going to find his way to that meeting, whether we go or not. And if he finds it without you in the room, he will tell whatever lie he likes about you, and there will not be one face in that crowd that knows different. But if you walk into that meeting on my arm, with the doc's statement in your pocket, every man and woman in Cold Creek is going to see what was done to you. And he is going to lose the only thing he's got left, which is the lie." She was breathing hard. "What if he's there?" "Then he's there." "What if he—" "Nora, the sheriff will be in that room. The doc will be in that room. And I will be in that room. Now you look at me, and you tell me whether you are coming, because I am not going to drag you, and I am not going to lose you, and I am not going to let any man take from you what you walk into that room to keep." She closed her eyes. She opened them. "I'm coming." "Good." "Samuel." "Ma'am, what if they make me speak?" "They will." "What do I say?" "You say what's true, that's all. What's true is ugly. Ugly truths put men in jail. Pretty lies put women in rivers. You pick." She looked at him, and something in her face shifted. The shape that had been there last night, the gray river water cold of her, it cracked. Just a little. Just enough. "All right, Samuel Carter." "All right, Nora Hale." The wagon ride into town was 19 miles, and not 1 mile of it was easy. Megan rode up front with her father. Luke rode in the back beside Nora, and the boy held her good hand the whole way, without ever asking permission, and Nora did not pull her hand away. Samuel saw it once in the side mirror of his memory, and did not let himself look again because he could not afford to feel it just yet. They came into Cold Creek 6:15. The street was already full. Samuel pulled the wagon up at the rail outside the meeting hall, and he set the brake, and he did not get down right away. He turned to Nora. "Ma'am, there is still time to ride back." "There is not." "All right then." He got down. He came around. He held up his hand. She took it. Nora Hale stepped down off the wagon onto the dirt of Cold Creek's main street, with bruises the color of plums on her face and her good hand in the hand of a widowed rancher, and the crowd on that street stopped talking. The way a crowd stops talking when it has just been hit in the chest by something it was not expecting. "Pa," Megan whispered. "They're staring." "Let 'em stare, daughter." "Pa, that's the lady from the—" "That is Mrs. Barrett, yes, and that is Mr. Tate, and there is the Reverend, and there is Kent. Walk, daughter, don't slow down." They walked. The hall was full. Every pew, every wall, every doorway. The men in front, the women along the sides, the children peeking through legs. Aldrich Kent stood at the front beside the council bench. He was smiling. He smiled wider when he saw them come in. "Mr. Carter, so glad you could join us." "Mr. Kent. And this must be—" "This is Mrs. Nora Hale." A whisper went through the room. "Mrs. Hale," Kent repeated. "Mrs. indeed." "That's right. And where is Mr. Hale?" "That is the question this council is going to answer tonight, Mr. Kent." Kent's smile did not leave his face, but his eyes changed. "Mr. Carter, you do not understand the purpose of this meeting." "I understand it just fine." This council was called to discuss the moral sheriff. The sheriff stood up from the front pew. "I have a statement from Dr. Eli Whitman signed and witnessed regarding the condition of the woman standing in front of you. I have a complaint signed by Mrs. Nora Hale against her husband, Cyrus Hale, for assault and attempted murder. And I have a telegram I sent 2 hours ago to the federal marshal in Denver asking for the file on the same Cyrus Hale. I will read all 3 documents into the record before this council votes on anything." Kent's smile cracked. "Sheriff, this is a council meeting, not a courtroom." "Then the council can adjourn until I'm done, Mr. Kent." "This is Hiley." "Read 'em, Sheriff. That was old Hattie Greer, 81 years old, in the back row. Read every damn word." "Mrs. Greer, read 'em." The sheriff read them. He read the doctor's statement first. He read about the wrist that had been broken and badly set. He read about the welt shaped like a man's belt buckle. He read about marks the doctor had not been required to look at to know were there. He read the complaint second. He read it slow. He read the telegram third. The telegram was the shortest document. It said, "Cyrus Hale wanted Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado for assault on 3 previous wives. 1 fatal request, immediate apprehension reply soonest." The room went still as a held breath. "Sheriff," somebody in the back said, "did you say 3 previous wives?" "That is what the telegram says, sir. 1 fatal. 1 fatal." Mrs. Barrett, who had been sitting in the second pew with her arms crossed, made a sound that was not quite a word. She lifted her hand to her mouth. Nora Hale did not react to any of it. She had known. Samuel could see it in her face. She had known about at least 2 of them, maybe all 3. "Mr. Kent," the sheriff again, "you called this meeting to discuss whether Mr. Carter should be pressured to send this woman from his house." "That is not how I would—" "Is that or is that not the purpose of this meeting?" A long pause. "It is." "Then I would like the council to consider that the woman in question is a witness in a federal capital case, that she is under the protection of the territorial peace officer, which is me, and that any man who pressures her to leave the place where she is safe is by the territorial code obstructing justice. Is the council clear on that?" The council was very clear on that. Kent's face was the color of old paper. "Mr. Carter," he said, and his voice was tight. It seems I was misinformed. It seems you were. I withdraw the motion. I figured you would. I trust the council will. Mrs. Hale. The whole room turned. Hattie Greer was on her feet in the back row. The old woman was leaning on her cane, and her white hair was coming loose from its pins, and her voice was the voice of a woman who had buried a husband and 3 sons, and was afraid of nothing on God's earth. Mrs. Hale, will you do an old woman the kindness of speaking to this room? Mrs. Greer. Just a few words, dear, just so we know your voice. Nora looked at Samuel. Samuel did not move. He did not nod. He did not push. He just looked back at her, and in his eyes was the thing he had said in the cabin. You say what's true. That's all. Nora Hale let go of his hand. She walked to the front of the room. She turned and faced the people of Cold Creek. She was not a tall woman. She was not a strong-looking woman. She was 22 years old, with a wrist that did not heal right, and bruises the color of storm clouds, and a wrapper that had belonged to another man's dead wife. My name is Nora Hale, she said. Her voice was low. It carried. My husband put me in the river 2 days ago. He stood on the bank and watched me float. He had hit me with a stove poker. He had broken my wrist with his boot. He had done other things I will not say in front of children. The room did not move. I lived because Mr. Samuel Carter pulled me out. I did not ask him to. He did it because he is the kind of man who does it. And then he took me into his house where his 2 children live, and he washed the river off me, and he put me in his dead wife's bed, and he sat in a chair beside that bed all night long because he was afraid I would wake up alone. A woman in the front row started to cry. It was Mrs. Barrett. There has been talk in this town. I know there has been. I know what is said about a woman who turns up at a widower's house with no name and no people. I am not going to defend myself against that talk. I am going to say only this. She paused. I have been married for 6 years. In those 6 years, I have not slept one full night without fear. Last night, I slept 4 hours in Samuel Carter's house. 4 hours. And in the morning, he fed me oats with honey on top, because that is what he used to do for his children, and he did not know what else to do with a woman who had forgotten how to be fed. Mrs. Barrett was sobbing now, sobbing into both her hands. If this town sends me away, I will go. I will not fight you. I am tired of fightin'. But I will tell you before I go what kind of man you have in Samuel Carter. And I will tell you what kind of woman his wife Sarah must have been to have raised him. Because it is a rare thing in this world to find a man who will lose his note and his pasture and his good name to keep a stranger alive. And I have not in my whole life met another one. She stopped. The room was silent, and then old Hattie Greer brought her cane down hard on the wooden floor. Once, twice, 3 times. And the man beside her stood up, and the woman beside him, and the row behind them, and the row behind that. Samuel Carter watched the people of Cold Creek rise to their feet for the woman he had pulled from the river, and his throat closed up, and he had to look at the floor. And then the back doors of the meeting hall slammed open, and a tall man in a black coat stepped through with 3 men behind him, and his spurs were the kind of spurs that cost a year of a rancher's wages, and his face was the face of a man who had just heard his name read off a federal telegram. Cyrus, Nora whispered. And the room went cold. The room went cold, and nobody moved, and Cyrus Hale walked down the center aisle of the Cold Creek meeting hall with the slow measured stride of a man who had never once been told to stop walking. Nora, sweetheart. His voice was soft. That was the worst part. Samuel had been expecting a roar. Cyrus Hale did not roar. Cyrus Hale spoke the way a man speaks to a horse that he means to break. Sweetheart, look what's happened to your face. Nora did not move. She was still standing at the front of the room. Her good hand had gone to her throat. Mr. Hale. The sheriff stepped into the aisle. Stop where you are. I'm just here for my wife, Sheriff. Stop where you are, Mr. Hale. I have rights. You have a federal warrant on you out of Denver, and I will read it to you in front of these witnesses if you take one more step toward that woman. Cyrus Hale stopped. He turned his head very slowly, and he looked at the sheriff. the way a man looks at a fly on his sleeve. "Sheriff." "Yes, sir." "Do you know who my brother is?" "I do." "Then you know what's going to happen to you when this is finished." "I know what I think will happen, Mr. Hale. I have been wrong before." The three men behind Cyrus had spread out along the back wall. Samuel marked them. One was tall and lean, with a scar through his upper lip. The second was short and thick and had the dead eyes of a man who had stopped counting the people he'd killed. The third was younger, maybe 19, and his hands were shaken. That one. That one was the one to watch. Scared men shoot first. "Pa." Megan's hand closed on Samuel's coat. "Pa, the boy by the door." "I see him." "His hand is on his. I see him, daughter. Get behind me." She got behind him. Luke, too. Samuel pushed both children back toward the wall without ever taking his eyes off the back of the room. Cyrus turned his head again. Found Samuel. "You." "Me? You're the one who pulled her out." "I am." "You should not have done that." "I did it anyway." "Sweetheart." Cyrus turned back to Nora. "Come on now, get your shawl. We're going home." Nora did not move. "Nora." She did not move. "Nora, sweetheart, you are embarrassing me." "That's far enough, Mr. Hale," the sheriff said. "Sheriff, I am speaking to my wife." "You are speaking to a woman who has filed a complaint against you for assault and attempted murder, and you are doing it in front of a peace officer, and I would advise you to think very carefully about your next sentence." "My next sentence?" Cyrus smiled. He had a smile that did not reach any other part of his face. "My next sentence, Sheriff, is that I am a man of means, and I can purchase a great many things in this territory, including your job." "Could be." "Could be. I have been sheriff of Cold Creek for 19 years, Mr. Hale. I expect to be sheriff for 19 more. But if tomorrow morning I am no longer sheriff because you bought my job, I will have spent my last day on it reading a federal warrant to a wife killer in front of 100 witnesses. And that will be a fine last day, Mr. Hale. That will be a real fine last day." Cyrus Hale's smile slipped a quarter-inch. "Read your warrant, Sheriff." "Beg pardon. Read it, out loud, right now, and we will see who is laughing at the end." The sheriff took the warrant out of his coat. He unfolded it. He cleared his throat. "By the authority of the Federal Marshal Service of the Territory of Colorado, I hereby authorize the arrest of one Cyrus Wendell Hale of Cheyenne, Wyoming, on the charges of assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, and the suspicious death of one Eleanor Hale, formerly Eleanor Pace, on or about the 3rd of. My first wife died of a fever." "That ain't what the warrant says, Mr. Hale." "My first wife died of a fever, and there was a doctor who signed the death certificate, and that doctor was your brother." The room moved. Just a small move, a breath taken in by 100 mouths at once. "Excuse me, Caleb Hale. Your brother, federal marshal in Cheyenne, also a licensed physician of dubious credential, signed the death certificate of your first wife, also signed the death certificate of your second wife, did not sign the death certificate of your third wife on account of she lived just long enough to walk into a sheriff's office in Laramie and tell her story before she went. That woman was a liar. Maybe so, Mr. Hale. But she's the reason there's a warrant on you in 3 territories now, and she's the reason I am holding this paper, and she is the reason your wife Nora is gonna sleep tonight in a house where you are not." Cyrus Hale did not say anything for a long moment. Then he laughed. He laughed the way a man laughs when he has decided that the talking part of the evening is over. "Boys," the 3 men behind him shifted. "Boys, I believe the sheriff is mistaken about who is going home tonight." "Mr. Hale." "Sweetheart." Cyrus took one step forward. "Nora, sweetheart, I am going to ask you one more time. Get your shawl." Samuel Carter stepped into the aisle. He did it without thinking about it. He did it the way a man steps in front of a runaway horse because the horse is coming and somebody has to. He stepped between Cyrus Hale and Nora, and he stood there with his hands open and empty at his sides, and he said, "Mr. Hale." "Move." "No, sir." "Move, rancher." "My name is Samuel Carter." "I do not care what your name is. I expect you don't. but everyone else in this room does. So I'm gonna say it once. My name is Samuel Carter. I run the cattle ranch east of town. I have lived in Cold Creek for 16 years. I buried my wife behind that church 3 years ago, and I have raised my 2 children alone since, and I have not laid a hand on a woman in anger one time in my life. And the woman behind me has more right to my house and my protection than you have ever had to anything in this world. And I am not moving." Cyrus Hale looked at him, looked through him, the way a man looks through a window at the weather. "Boy at the door." "Pa," Megan whispered. Samuel did not turn. "Sheriff," he said. "I see him, Sam. He's the one to watch." "I see him." "Boy at the door." Cyrus raised his voice without raising it. "Son, you take the rancher. The boys will take the sheriff." The young man's hand was on his pistol grip. His knuckles were white. His eyes were too wide. "Son," Samuel said. He did not raise his voice either. "Son, look at me." The boy looked. "How old are you, son?" "That ain't your—" "How old?" 19. 19. You got a mother, son." "What?" "You got a mother. Somebody who fed you when you were a baby. Somebody who's praying for you tonight whether you know it or not." "Shut your mouth, mister." "Son, you pull that pistol and the sheriff is going to shoot you. That's a fact. He's been at this 19 years, and you have been at it about 19 days. You will be dead before your hand clears leather. Now, your mother is going to get a telegram tomorrow that says her boy died in a meeting hall in Cold Creek working for a man who killed 3 wives. And she is going to sit down in her kitchen and she is going to ask herself where she went wrong. Do not do that to your mother, son." The boy's hand was shaken. "Son," the sheriff said, "he's telling you the truth." "Shut up, both of you." "Son, step away from the door." "I said shut." "Son, step away from the door and I will tell the federal marshal that you came in willing to a peaceful arrest, and you will spend 2 years in a territorial jail instead of swinging from a rope. You hear me?" The boy was breathing hard. "Mr. Hale," he said. "Don't you dare," Cyrus said. "Mr. Hale, I did not sign on for. Don't you dare." The boy stepped away from the door. He did it slow. He kept his hand off his pistol. He raised both palms and he walked along the back wall and he stood next to a pew where an old farmer reached up and put a hand on his shoulder and held it there. That was when the second man broke. The thick one with the dead eyes. He looked at the boy, and he looked at the sheriff, and he looked at the warrant in the sheriff's hand, and he made a calculation Samuel could see him make. "Mr. Hale," he said, "I am out." "Damn you." "I am out, Mr. Hale. I do not work federal warrants. That is more than my contract." "I will pay you double." "You ain't gonna be paying anybody anything by morning, Mr. Hale. I'd rather be alive and broke." He walked out the side door. That left the tall one, the one with the scar. He did not move. He did not blink. His hand stayed on his pistol grip, and his eyes stayed on Cyrus Hale, and Samuel understood with the cold clarity of a man who has been a soldier that this was the one who was loyal. "Sheriff," Samuel said quiet. "I see him, Sam." "He's gonna pull." "I expect he will." "Don't let him." "I aim not to." Cyrus Hale straightened up. His hand was inside his coat. Samuel could not see the hand, but he knew where it was. "Sweetheart." Cyrus's voice had gone very soft. "I am sorry to do this in front of the children, Nora. I really am." "Cyrus." That was Nora's voice, from behind Samuel. "Cyrus, look at me." Cyrus looked. "Cyrus, you put your hand outside your coat, or my friend the sheriff is going to put a bullet through your collarbone." The room was so quiet, you could hear the lamp on the council bench burning. "Sweetheart." "I am not your sweetheart." "Nora." 6 years, Cyrus. I have been your wife for 6 years, and I have not been a sweetheart for 1 minute of it. Now, you take your hand out of your coat." Cyrus's lip curled. "You think I came here without insurance? What's that supposed to mean?" "I mean my brother is 2 days behind me with 12 federal deputies, And when he gets here, this town is going to learn what it costs to put a hand on a Hale. Mr. Hale. The sheriff again. Your brother was relieved of duty by the U.S. Marshal Service 3 days ago, pending an investigation into the death certificates of 2 women. So whoever is 2 days behind you, sir, it is not a federal posse. Cyrus's face went the color of bone. You're lying. I have the telegram in my other pocket, Mr. Hale. Would you like me to read it? Cyrus did not answer. Take your hand out of your coat, Mr. Hale. Cyrus did not move. Mr. Hale. Last time. It happened in less than 2 seconds. The tall man with the scar drew his pistol. The sheriff drew his pistol. Samuel pivoted and threw himself sideways and took Nora down to the floor underneath him. A shot fired. A second shot fired. A woman in the third pew screamed. A child started crying. And then it was quiet. Samuel lay on top of Nora on the floor of the meeting hall, his arm across her shoulders, his other hand braced flat on the boards. He could feel her breathing, fast, alive. Nora. I'm all right. You hit? No. No, Samuel. I'm not. Are you? No, ma'am. He raised his head. The tall man with the scar was on the ground. He was not moving. The sheriff was standing over him with his pistol still in his hand, and his face was the face of a man who had done a thing 19 years of practice had prepared him to do. Cyrus Hale was on his knees in the aisle. His right hand was clamped over his left shoulder. Blood was coming through his fingers in a slow, steady seep. The pistol he had drawn was lying in the aisle 2 feet away from him. Samuel had not heard him draw it. The sheriff had. Mr. Hale. You shot me. I did. You shot me. In the shoulder, Mr. Hale, on purpose. If I had wanted to kill you, I would have. Now you take your good hand off the bad one, and you put both of them on top of your head, or the next bullet ain't gonna miss your heart. Cyrus Hale put his hands on top of his head. The doc was already moving down the aisle with his bag. Sam, the doc said as he passed. Get the woman up. Get her out of this room. She does not need to see this part. Yes, doctor. Samuel got to his knees. He helped Nora up. She was shaken. Not crying, just shaken. Her good hand was gripping his sleeve so hard, her knuckles had gone white. Megan. Pa. His daughter was at his elbow, pale, steady. Take her outside, Meg. Take her to the wagon. Sit with her. Hold her hand. Yes, sir. Luke goes with you. Yes, sir. You do not let her be alone for 1 minute. No, sir. He kissed the top of his daughter's head. He kissed the top of his son's head. He watched his 12-year-old girl take the hand of a beat woman 6 years older than her and lead her down the aisle of the meeting hall, past the bleeding man, and out into the night air. When the door shut behind them, Samuel Carter turned around and looked at Cyrus Hale on his knees in the aisle. Sheriff? Sam? I would like to speak to him. Sam. He is in custody. I am not going to touch him, Sheriff. I just want to speak to him. The sheriff considered. He nodded once. Samuel walked down the aisle. He went down on one knee in front of Cyrus Hale, the way he had gone down on one knee in front of Nora that morning. He did it the same way for the same reason. Some words you cannot deliver standing up. Mr. Hale. Go to hell. I aim to. Eventually. But not tonight. Cyrus Hale looked at him with eyes that had gone glassy from blood loss and rage. Mr. Hale. I want you to look at me. I am looking. You are not. You are looking through me. Look at me. Cyrus looked. Mr. Hale. I have a thing to tell you, and I want you to remember it for the rest of your life, however long that turns out to be. What? My wife Sarah died 3 years and 4 months and 11 days ago. She died in childbed, Mr. Hale. The baby went first, and then she went after. And in those last hours, she made me promise her one thing. She said, Sam Carter, don't you turn into a hard man on account of me. There is going to be people in your life who need a soft hand, and I do not want my dying to take that hand away from anybody. Cyrus's mouth twisted. Mr. Hale, that woman you put in the river, that is the person my wife was talking about. I did not know it at the time. I have known it for 2 days. And I am going to spend the rest of my natural life keeping the promise I made to my dying wife by taking care of the woman you tried to kill. You think she'll have you? I do not know if she will, Mr. Hale. That is her choice. I have not asked. I will not ask, not for a long time, maybe never. But I will tell you this. Whether she has me or not, she will never want for a roof, or a meal, or a hand on her shoulder when she wakes up crying. And she will never for the rest of her life hear your name spoken in her hearing again. Because the next time your name is spoken in this territory, Mr. Hale, it is gonna be at a hanging. Cyrus Hale spat. It hit Samuel's boot. Samuel looked down at his boot. Then he looked back up at Cyrus. That's the last thing of yours that's ever gonna touch me, Mr. Hale. He stood up. His knee popped. He walked out of the meeting hall, and he did not look back, and the sheriff put Cyrus Hale in irons, and the doc patched the shoulder wound in the council chamber, while old Hattie Greer sat in the front row with her cane between her knees and watched the whole thing without saying a word. Outside, Samuel found his wagon. His daughter was on the bench with her arm around Nora Hale. Luke was in Nora's lap, and Luke was asleep the way only an 8-year-old can sleep through the worst night of his life, and Nora's good hand was in the boy's hair. Megan. Pa. You all right? I am, Pa. Your brother. He fell asleep on her on the way out the door. Samuel looked at Nora. Ma'am. Samuel. Are you all right? I do not know yet. That is a fair answer. She tried to smile. It did not quite work, but it was closer than it had been that morning over the oats, and Samuel saw it, and he did not let himself feel it just yet, because there was still a long ride home, and the wagon would not drive itself, and a man does what is in front of him before he feels what has happened. He climbed up onto the bench. He took the reins. He clucked to the horses. The wagon rolled slow out of Cold Creek and back onto the long road home. And behind it, the lights of the meeting hall stayed lit a long time into the night. And inside those lights, the people of Cold Creek began the slow work of figuring out who they were going to be in the morning. The wagon rolled into the dooryard a little before midnight, and Samuel Carter climbed down off the bench feeling every one of his 41 years in his knees and his back, and the place between his shoulder blades where he had been carrying a rifle and a promise for 2 days running. Megan. Pa. Help your brother to bed. Yes, sir. Don't bother taking his boots off. Just put a blanket over him. Yes, Pa. She slid down with Luke half draped across her shoulder. The boy did not wake. Samuel watched his children walk into the cabin, and then he turned around and held out his hand to the woman still sitting on the wagon bench. Ma'am. Samuel. Come on down. She took his hand. She came down. Her good hand stayed in his a beat longer than it had to, and Samuel did not pull away, and neither one of them mentioned it. Samuel. Yeah. I'm going to fall down in about a minute. Then we'd better walk fast. He got her into the cabin. He got her into Sarah's room. He set her down on the edge of the bed, and he knelt and worked the laces of the borrowed shoes she was wearing, because her own had gone with her into the river, and he set them by the door. Samuel. Ma'am. You don't have to. I know I don't. Then why? He looked up at her from the floor. Because somebody should have Nora. She started to cry then. Not the held-in crying of the meeting hall. Not the fighter's crying she had done in the chair by the door. The deep kind. The kind that came up out of 6 years and would not be stopped. Samuel did not move from the floor. He stayed on his knees in front of her, and he did not touch her, and he did not speak. He just stayed. After a long time, her breathing evened out. Samuel. Yeah. I do not know how to live without being afraid. I expect you don't. I do not know what to do with my hands when nobody is hitting me. I expect you don't. What if I am no good at it? What if I forgot? Nora. What? You did not forget. You just have not had a chance. Now you got the chance. And you got time. And there ain't nobody on this property gonna rush you. She was quiet a long minute. Samuel. Yes, ma'am. Will you sit in the chair tonight? I was gonna anyway. All right. He got up off his knees. He sat in the chair by the bed. He pulled his hat down over his eyes. And the woman in the bed cried quiet for another quarter hour, and then she slept, and Samuel Carter did not sleep 1 minute that night, but he did not mind it, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, he heard her sigh in her sleep, a sound that did not have any fear in it, and he understood that he had not heard a woman make that sound in his house since Sarah had been alive. He pulled his hat down lower, and he did not let himself feel it. Not yet. There would be time. The town came in the morning. Samuel was outside splitting kindling when the first wagon came up the trail. He set the axe down and shaded his eyes, and he saw Mrs. Eliza Barrett at the reins of her bay buggy, alone with a covered basket on the seat beside her. He waited at the gate. Mr. Carter? Mrs. Barrett. She did not get down. She was holding the reins too tight, and her mouth was working the way a woman's mouth works when she is trying to find a sentence she has never had to say before in her whole life. Mr. Carter, I have brought cornbread. I see that. And butter, fresh butter, from this morning. That's kind of you? It is not. Beg pardon. It is not kind of me, Mr. Carter. Kind would have been bringing it 3 days ago. This is something else. I do not know what to call it. I am 81 years old, and I have never had to call it anything before. Mrs. Barrett. I went home from that meetin' hall last night. Mr. Carter and I sat at my kitchen table, and I asked myself what kind of woman I had become. And I did not have a good answer, and I sat with that for a long time, and then I baked cornbread. She held out the basket. She did not look at him. Mr. Carter, may I see her? Mrs. Barrett. I will say what I came to say, and I will go. I will not stay if she does not want me to. I'll ask her. That is fair. He went into the cabin. Nora was up. She was at the kitchen table in Sarah's wrapper, and Megan was braiding her hair, and Luke was reading a primer out loud at her elbow, and the three of them looked up when he came in, like he had walked in on something he was not supposed to see. Samuel stopped in the doorway. He could not move for a minute. Pa. Megan quiet. Yeah, Meg. Is somebody at the gate? Mrs. Barrett. Nora went still. She's brought cornbread, Samuel said, and she is asking if she can see you. She says she will go if you say no. Pa, Megan said. She is the one who started all the, I know it, daughter. She is the one who, I know it. It ain't your call, and it ain't mine. Nora. Nora looked at her own hands a long minute. Send her in. Nora. Send her in, Samuel. He sent her in. Mrs. Barrett came through the cabin door with the basket in her hands and her hat askew, and she stopped just inside the door and she looked at the woman at the table, and her face crumpled the way a face crumples when an old woman has finally seen the person she has been talking about as if they were a thing instead of a person. Mrs. Hale. Mrs. Barrett. I am so sorry. Sit down, Mrs. Barrett. I do not deserve to. I said sit, ma'am. I have been on the wrong end of a man's anger for 6 years, and I am not going to be on the wrong end of an old woman's guilt for 1 more minute. Sit. Mrs. Barrett sat. Megan kept braiding. Luke kept reading. And the old gossip of Cold Creek wept into a cornbread basket at Samuel Carter's kitchen table, while a woman she had tried to ruin poured her a cup of coffee with a hand that did not heal right. That was the first wagon. The second came an hour later. It was old Hattie Greer with her cane and a pot of stew. The third was Reverend Thorne alone without his wife with his hat in both hands and a look on his face like a man come to ask forgiveness for a thing he had not yet figured out how to name. The fourth was the doc who had set up a table on the porch and rebroken Nora's wrist and reset it proper while she bit down on a strip of leather and Samuel held her good hand. By sundown there had been 11 wagons. By the end of the week, the south pasture had been mended without Samuel asking anybody, and there was a smoked ham hanging in the spring house that he had not bought, and somebody had left a rocking chair on the porch with a folded quilt on the seat, and no note. And on the 8th day, a federal marshal out of Denver rode up the trail with 3 deputies and the news that Cyrus Hale had been moved to the territorial prison in Canyon City, that the trial would commence in the fall, and that the Hale estate had been frozen pending the outcome. Mrs. Hale. Marshal. Ma'am, you will be required to give testimony. I figured I would. Can you do it? She looked at Samuel. Samuel looked back at her. I can do it, Marshal. Good woman. Marshal? Yes, ma'am. His brother. Caleb Hale was arrested in Cheyenne on the 7th, ma'am. He is being held without bond. Both of them. Both of them, ma'am. Nora Hale set both hands flat on the table, the good one and the bad one. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. She did not laugh. She just sat there a long minute with her palms on the wood, and then she opened her eyes and she said, "Thank you, Marshal." Ma'am. The marshal rode off. Samuel watched him go from the porch. Nora came up beside him. Samuel? Yeah. It is over. The first part is. What's the second part? He did not answer right away. He stood there with his hands on the porch rail, and he looked out over the pasture where his cattle were grazing, and beyond the cattle to the hills where his wife Sarah was buried, and he thought about a promise made in a sick bed 3 years and 4 months and most of a year ago. The second part, he said, is whatever you want it to be, ma'am. I will not push you in any direction. You can stay here as long as you like. You can leave whenever you like. There is a room in this cabin with your name on it, and there will be for as long as I am drawing breath. That ain't a question I am asking you. That is a fact I am telling you. Samuel. Yeah. I do not want to leave. He looked at her then. He could not help it. Nora. I do not want to leave, Samuel. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not next year. All right. All right. All right, Nora. That is all you got to say. What more is there? She laughed. It was a small, surprised laugh, the laugh of a woman discovering that her own throat could still make that sound. Nothing more, she said. I expect that's all. The summer went. Nora's wrist healed. The bruises on her face faded to yellow and then to nothing. She started cooking again, slow, careful the way a woman cooks who is remembering how. And one morning, Samuel came in from the barn to find her at the stove making biscuits the way Sarah had made them, and he had to walk straight back outside because his throat had closed up, and his eyes had started to sting. Megan taught her how Sarah had taught Megan. Luke followed her around like a duckling. The boy started calling her Miss Nora, and then just Nora, and then one day in late August, when he fell out of the apple tree and skinned both knees, he ran past Samuel in the dooryard and straight into the cabin, yelling for Mama, and Nora came running before either of them realized what he had said. Nora stopped in the kitchen doorway. Luke stopped in the middle of the floor. They looked at each other a long minute. The boy was bleeding on the floorboards. His face was full of a question he was too young to ask. "Sweetheart," Nora said. Her voice cracked on it. "Come here, sugar. Let me see." Luke went to her. Samuel watched it from the porch. He did not come in. He sat down on the top step, and he put his face in his hands, and he did not move for a long time. And when he finally did move, it was to walk down to the spring house, where it was cool and dark, and nobody could see him, and he leaned his forehead against the stone wall, and he said his wife's name out loud just once, because he had a thing to tell her. Sarah. The spring house did not answer. "Sarah, honey, there is a woman in our house. She is wearing your wrapper, and she is teaching our girl to braid different, and she is feeding our boy biscuits, and he just called her Mama. And I do not know what to do with that. I do not know how to be a man with 2 wives even when one of them is in the ground." He stopped. He pressed harder against the stone. "Sarah, I am asking you." The spring house did not answer. But something inside Samuel Carter answered the way a thing answers when a man has been carrying a question for 3 years and has finally set it down. And what it answered was the thing his wife had said in their bedroom on the last day of her life, which was, "Don't you turn into a hard man on account of me, Sam Carter. I did not love a hard man. I loved you." And Samuel Carter understood standing in his own spring house in the late summer of his 41st year that the keeping of that promise was not a thing that ended. It was a thing that started over again every morning. He walked back up to the cabin. Nora was still in the kitchen. Luke's knees had been washed and bandaged, and the boy was sitting on the table eating a biscuit, and Nora was wiping her hands on her apron. And when Samuel came through the door, she looked up and she did not say anything because she could see his face and she knew. Nora. Yes. Will you walk with me a little ways? Yes, Samuel. They walked out past the corral and down toward the south pasture. He did not take her hand. He did not need to. Some kinds of walking you do side by side, and the not touchin' is the closest thing there is. Nora. Yes. I am not going to ask you anything today. All right. I am not going to ask you anything this year, maybe. All right, Samuel. But I want you to know something, and I want you to know it without me asking anything in return. What's that? That boy in there called you Mama, and I did not correct him, and I am not going to correct him. Not today, not next week, not ever. Because if there is a thing in this world my Sarah would have wanted, it is that boy having a mama. And Sarah and I made him together, and she would know better than anybody that he ain't built for going without one. Nora's eyes were full. She did not let them spill. Samuel. Yeah. Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that whatever happens between you and me is for you to decide. But that boy is not waiting on a decision, and I will not make him wait. So you stay, or you go, ma'am, and either way you decide is fine. But if you stay, you are his mama. That part is not on the table anymore. She stood in the south pasture with her good hand held against her mouth. Samuel Carter. Ma'am? I am gonna stay. All right. Did you hear me? I heard you, ma'am. That's all you got to say. All right. What more is there? She laughed. The laugh came out cracked and watery, and then it came out clean, and then it came out like the laugh of a young woman who had just remembered after a long time that laughin' was something she used to do. The wedding was in October. It was not in the church. The Reverend had offered, and Samuel had thanked him, and Samuel had said no. There had been a wedding in that church, and it had been Sarah's, and there was not going to be a second one. Not for Samuel. He had thought about it for 3 nights, and he had told Nora on the 4th, and Nora had kissed him on the cheek for the first time, and said, "Thank you, Samuel." For what? For not asking me to stand where she stood. So they got married in the dooryard of the cabin under the cottonwood tree, where Sarah had once planted a kitchen garden that Nora had spent the summer bringing back. The Reverend came, Doc Whitman came, the sheriff came. Old Hattie Greer came in a wagon with a quilt across her knees, and Mrs. Barrett came with 3 pies, and half the town came whether they had been invited or not. Megan stood up beside her father with her mother's locket on a chain around her neck. Luke held the rings. Nora Hale walked across the dooryard in a dress Mrs. Barrett had sewn her with a wrist that had finally healed straight, and she stood across from Samuel Carter with her hands in his hands, and she said the word yes to a question she had once been forced to say yes to under threat. And this time the word came out of her own throat by her own choice in the open air of her own home, and it was a different word entirely. The Reverend pronounced them. Samuel kissed her. The town clapped. Old Hattie Greer brought her cane down on the porch boards 3 times, and that somehow was the part that made Nora cry. The first frost came in November. Samuel woke up to find Nora at the window in her wrapper, looking out at the white on the pasture, and he came up behind her and put his hands on her shoulders. "Ma'am? Samuel? You been up long?" "A while." "Something wrong?" No, Samuel, nothing wrong." She turned around to face him. She put both hands on his chest. "Samuel." "Yeah, I am pregnant." He did not say anything. He could not. "Samuel." "I heard you, ma'am." "Are you all right?" "I am thinking." "What are you thinking?" He put his arms around her. He pulled her against him. He pressed his face into the top of her hair, and she could feel his shoulders shake, and she did not pull back, and she did not say anything, because there are some things that even a strong man has to do without being watched, and the wife of a strong man knows when to hold him and not look. Samuel stayed against her hair a long time. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red, but his face was steady. Nora. Yes. There has not been a baby in this house since the one that took Sarah. I know it, Samuel. I have been afraid of it. I know that too. I am not afraid anymore. Good. I am not afraid because I have spent 3 years trying to keep a promise to a dying woman, and I think I have figured out finally what she meant by it. And I think she meant this. And I think she would have liked you. And I think she would have wanted me to put my hand right here on this baby and tell it that its mama is the bravest woman I have ever known, and its big sister is going to teach it how to braid wrong, and its big brother is going to fall out of every tree on this property, at least once, and its daddy is going to love it. From the first breath until the last. And we are going to name it Samuel. If it is a boy, and we are going to name it Sarah. If it is a girl, and there will not be 1 minute of its life when it does not know whose house it was born into, and whose name it carries, and how loved it is. Nora was crying. She did not wipe her face. It is a boy, she said. How do you know? I just know Samuel. All right. Samuel. Yeah? Samuel Carter II. All right, Nora. And I want a Sarah next. I expect we can manage that. I love you, Samuel. He kissed the top of her head. He kissed her wrist where the bone had finally healed straight. He kissed her once on the mouth. I love you, Nora Carter. That's the first time you said it. I know it. What took you so long? I had to be sure. Are you sure now? I am sure now. The boy was born in the spring. They named him Samuel Carter II, and his big brother Luke held him first, and his big sister Megan cried when she saw him, and his mother Nora counted his fingers and his toes, and his father Samuel walked out behind the cabin to the place where his first wife was buried, and he laid one hand on the marker and he said, Sarah, we named him after me. I hope you don't mind. The wind moved across the pasture. Samuel Carter stood up. He walked back to the cabin. He went inside where there was a fire in the stove and bread on the table and a baby in his wife's arms and his 2 older children fighting over who got to hold the baby next, and he closed the door behind him against the cold of the world outside. And the woman who had been left at the river's edge to die became the mother of his son and the keeper of his home, and the answer to a promise made in a sickbed long ago. She had been pulled out of the water by a man who had no reason to stop. She had been taken in by a family who had no obligation to her. She had been defended by a town that had every reason to look away. And in the end, she had not just lived, she had been chosen by a widowed cowboy who gave her his horse and his heart and his home. And she had chosen back,